right back in because I want to keep going with this. So, okay. First, while people are getting back into the room, let's define this. What is a text?
A text is basically like written information.
Written information. Awesome. You're absolutely right. And you're not really all a text, but you can be reduced to a text. And oftentimes we do reduce people to texts in order to make life easier. Sometimes you're your name. Sometimes you're your birthday. In the United States, sometimes you're reduced to a number, your social security number, right? Sometimes you're your passport number. Sometimes you're your DNA strand, right? Sorry, say Elizabeth, how did you define a text a second ago?
Written information.
Written information, right? Sometimes you are just, to other people at least, you are just written information. I don't think you're just a text because there's parts of you, like your consciousness, that are not just information that you can write down. They're more than just that, right? And in fact, I'm going to argue something right now that once somebody writes something down, they are separating themselves from it a little bit, and the implication that like we can know somebody based on what they write, like, oh, Shakespeare feels this way, right? Or you know, something like that. It's not necessarily true. There's always a separation between information about you or information that you write down or share with the world and you yourself, your consciousness, your wholeness of being, right? So it's complicated. It's tricky. We can't just say like, oh, Shakespeare meant this when he had Hamlet speak to his dead father, right? Well, we don't know that. We can look at Hamlet as a character. We can look at Hamlet, the play, as a text, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that we know all that much about Shakespeare, right? Especially given the fact that some people argue that Shakespeare wasn't one person, right? I just saw a chat pop up, so I'm going to open up the chat. Oh, you can't hear me. Can anybody hear me? Is everybody hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it because I'm being too loud, Mary, or you there's no volume? Okay.
Maybe she didn't connect her microphone to the Zoom.
Yeah. Try reconnecting to the meeting. Okay, cool. All right, anyway, so there's this tricky thing about text being separated from author that we can get into later. We can talk about it. But yeah, absolutely, a text is written information, any kind of written information. Okay, let's start to dive into this. We might not get to all of this sort of stuff. There's lots of stuff to explore here. But yeah, text is, okay, Okay, this is one of my favorite paintings. We'll explore a couple of paintings, but let me ask you this. There is obviously written information here. And if anybody speaks French, does anybody speak French?
A little bit.
Okay, good.
Not, I don't know the words like in English.
Yeah, Inessa, interpret it as well as you can.
This means like, this is not what you see. Like, I don't know the words just in English.
This is not a pipe.
Yes.
Okay, good. Anna, you raised your hand.
Yes, actually, it means this is not a pipe. It's a picture of a pipe.
Ah!
It's from the book I read. It's Fault in Our Stars.
Okay.
They talk about this.
John Green loves to talk about this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, John Green is a really, really, really smart guy. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about tell us a little bit more about how The Fault in Our Stars explores the notion that this is not a pipe, but it's a picture of a pipe.
Yes, they basically say that not everything we see it in what it is. We see what we want to see.
Okay.
And I remember the girl had a shirt within this picture, and she tried to explain it to her mom what it really is, and she was like really obsessed about this sentence because she said that this really described what she feels.
Okay, good. Okay. And I want to put something else on top of this as far as how I interpret this. This is by a French painter named Rene Magritte, right? And so part of what I think that this is also doing is demonstrating how there is a difference between text and thing. Like if I use the word pipe, no matter what, that word pipe, if I'm saying it in Armenian or French or English. So how do you say the word, Anna, how do you say the word pipe in Armenian?
Mushtak,
maybe.
I don't know, I'm not sure I know.
Mushtuk.
Yes.
Mushtuk. Okay, cool. So again, there's a little bit of a separation of relationship between the word itself and the thing to which the word refers, right? There's a French philosopher named Jean Baudrillard, right? And Baudrillard defined this in terms of two words. There is a signifier, right? And a signifier might be a word, right? And then there is a signified, right? And a signified is the thing that the word is pointing at. In this case, a pipe, right? Saussure also wrote about that. That's correct. Yeah, absolutely, right? And so they're drawing a distinction between a text and the things in the world that the texts relate to, right? How do you pronounce that, Steve?
It's Tzachamort.
Okay. I'm not going to try and pronounce it again. Good.
Yeah.
But there's different connotations the moment that you use it in English versus in Armenian versus in French, and let me start to unpack that a little bit, right? For example, there's nothing about the word pipe, or say it again, Steve.
Tzachamort.
Okay. There's nothing about that is particularly useful for smoking tobacco. There's nothing particular. It doesn't make you look like Sherlock Holmes if you say that word, or the word pipe, right? Dot, right? Let me give you another example. The word cat has nothing to do with a cat, right? What's the word cat in Armenian?
Gadu.
Katu.
Or piso.
Piso or badu. Yeah, I know.
No, Katu.
Pity.
Okay, good. Alexander made a really good point. Sherlock Holmes never actually uses pipes in the books. That's just an addition to the collective unconscious. All of that sort of stuff. So badu or cat. These are not like a cat doesn't walk around going cat, right? A cat walks around going meow, 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 right? A cat, the word cat doesn't have anything about it. It doesn't have a tail. The word cat doesn't drink milk, right? So there's always a separation, right? And there's all sorts of implications that happen before this. So as I think it was Anessa a second ago pointed out, right? It's not a pipe, it's a painting of a pipe. Or wait, was that who?
No, it was Anna.
Okay, Anna. So you point out that it's a painting of a pipe, right? Actually, it's not even a painting of a pipe. What is it?
I don't know.
Piece
Good.
of paper.
It's not a piece of paper. It's pixels on a screen. It's pixels on a screen that are somebody took a photograph of a painting of a pipe, right? And those pixels on that screen are actually not on one screen, right? How many screens are they on right now? At least 24, right? So it's dots of light, right? If we really want to get down to it, you're staring at dots of light,
It's
right?
zeros and ones.
Right, or we're staring at computer core. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So it's not even okay. Let me back up. Gohar had a comment. She says, I wanted to comment on reading. Gurdjieff said about his texts that firstly, you just skip the text like you do with almost all books. For the second time, you read out loud for others. For the third time, you read to yourself. And this time you get the meaning. But I want to contend, Gohar, again, that just like there is not one pipe right now, I want to also contend that there's not one meaning, right? Gago, you think that Sherlock Holmes actually used pipes in the book? I know he plays the violin in the books.
Yeah, I actually Googled it to check it. He actually did smoke.
Oh. Would you share? Would you? You
Yeah.
can add a file.
Give me a second.
Would you attach what you've got there? Ooh, my nose is tingling. Okay, so this is. I brought these up because there's a couple of jokes to kind of play on this idea a little bit, right? This one said, "This is not a telephone," right? This one says, "This is not a president," right? This one says, "This is a pipe, artsy retard." And what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I want to know your perspective when you see this text, right? Because fundamentally it's a text. That's the point that right? This is not a lightsaber. This is not a pair of pants, right? But when we look at this one I think is a little bit curious and a little bit interesting. Okay, Quora, let's see.
Maybe it's like you just don't have to go that much deeper. You just have to accept it as it is. Just like live easily. I don't know. Like
Okay.
it's a pipe. Accept it like it's a pipe. Don't.
Okay. Yeah. But there's two things because I absolutely fundamentally agree, right? There are lenses, just like what Wallace was saying. There are ways that we can look at the world. We don't have to just accept our default, but honestly, sometimes the default is right, or sometimes the default is wise, or sometimes the default is the most useful. Like you don't have to.
Here I want to comment like a quote Freud, who said sometimes cigars are just cigars. It's like that.
Right. So everything that we encounter in a text is fundamentally symbolic because it is a text. There's no such thing as like a word being a thing, right? But the degree to which we interpret those symbols is very, very complicated, right? Inessa, can you expand on that really quickly?
On this or on what?
On what you just said in the chat.
Oh, I just said that I really loved Gohar's comments on different things we discussed because she always quotes something from different philosophers, and they are just in the right place. For example, when we discuss something, she finds out a really interesting thing and she quotes it and just in place and just in time.
So pardon me.
It's like a communication builder or I don't know.
In general, you're saying you like her comments in general, not that specific comment that she just made.
No. In general.
Yeah. No. That's awesome. I wanted to clarify. Okay.
Okay.
So according to Quora, according to Kevin McGovern, the canon mentions Holmes smoking 3 kinds of pipes: black or dirty, oil clay pipe, and an old briar and a long cherry wood. Doyle has Holmes smoking the clay pipe most often. Blah 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 blah. Okay, good. Okay, yeah. But what I really liked about this interaction was that Alexander and Gagi can explore, you know, a 100-year-old character, right? In the context of this, and we can start to bring in other comments, right? This is scholarly discussion, right? And that was an excellent example of scholarly discussion, sharing it back and forth. Now, you just invited Kevin McGovern into our class today. He doesn't know it. He lives in Pittsburgh and he's an electronics technician, but you invited him into our class today. Now, we could explore that deeper, right? Or we could explore something else. Okay. Do I want to get to magic today? No, you know, I'm not gonna. There's a poem. I want to read this poem, but we're not gonna read it today. I'm gonna come back to this as well. But I actually do want everybody to take just a second and closely read this. So read through it once from beginning to end, and then read through it again. And I want you to choose a single detail from this text that you find most important or interesting. One detail. And I'm going to ask one or two of you to share that detail with you, with the class in just a second. So take 3 or 4 seconds to read through this. Okay, good. When you have a second, I want go ahead and I'm not going to ask for this from everybody, but go ahead and in the chat, drop that detail. Just go ahead and type it out. It can be a part of a sentence, or more than a sentence, but go ahead and type it out really quickly into the chat. What sticks out to you from this text as a whole? Write it down and add it to the text or to the chat. Good. Take a couple more seconds. Good, good, good. Yeah, I'm gonna focus where it's okay, Alex. Actually, I'm gonna focus where Armin and Alex and David are focusing right now. This notion of extrasomatic knowledge. In fact, I think an excellent definition of text is information stored outside of our bodies. Can anybody think of a really common example of information stored outside of our bodies?
Computers.
A travel brochure.
Okay, good. A travel brochure.
Just the books that we read.
Okay, any book that you read. If you read Moby Dick, if you read any Tumanyan, if you read, you know, absolutely. What else?
Maybe playing a
Mr.
music
Bishan,
instrument.
my Zoom is very lagging. Can I quickly rejoin if it's okay?
Yes, please feel free. Thank you for asking. Okay, good. So any book that you read, a travel brochure. What else?
Also, maybe a music instrument we play.
Okay. I would say that the instrument itself is really interesting, right? We've built into that instrument ways of storing information, right? Right. That's why a piano, if you play one piano, you can play another piano, right? Another example of this is sheet music, right? If you put music in front of you, right, the notes on a page is also information stored outside of our bodies. The one that okay, Wikipedia, time, the whole internet, yeah, absolutely. The one that I think of over and over again is telephone numbers, right? I used to remember telephone numbers. I can even remember my number, my mother and father's number. It's 480-926-7820, right? If you want to call my mom and dad in Arizona, there's the number.
I think we can say that everything that outside of our bodies is information. So it's just our consciousness that made us to process all this and to interpret this as information. So basically, for human beings, everything can be an information that outside of the bodies.
If we have fashioned it in any way, I think that I agree with you, right? If we draw a line in the sand, suddenly that is extrasomatic knowledge, right? I think that you're absolutely right. Yeah. A fingerprint. I really like that, Elizabeth, right? Because a fingerprint, yeah. Fingerprints are fascinating. How many use fingerprints to open their cell phones? How many use your face to open your cell phone? Right? Good, absolutely. Okay, good. Okay. So this is by a guy named Carl Sagan. It's from a book called Dragons of Eden, but I think it's a really crucial point. No faces, no person on that. Okay, fair enough. Do you use a password still? Or do you just keep your phone unlocked?
Password.
Cool. Okay. So I want to turn our attention. So I've been going back and forth about what are texts, what is thinking, what is reading, right? I think that all three of these are crucial questions to be asking right now. What are texts? What's the relationship between the texts that we read and the thoughts that we think, right? And fundamentally, what does this have to do with the text that we read and explored earlier this week? And I think it comes back to this question of details and awareness, right? This question of how do you get involved in the information around you, whether that information is code or poetry or photography. Because, by the way, one of the reasons why I really like using the Magritte painting is because it's demonstrating that visual objects are obviously also information. Visual objects are obviously also text. And we'll explore that a little bit next week, right? You can read a painting just like you can read a poem, right? It's a question of where are you directing your attention, right? And we do read humans, absolutely. But we also write ourselves, right? What am I wearing on my shirt? I'm wearing Mickey Mouse, right? I'm telling you something very specific about myself, that I'm fun. That's basically what I'm saying to you, is that I'm a fun guy, right? And Mickey Mouse is fun. I don't take myself too seriously, right? When you have a beard, the way that you cut your hair, I'm getting from a couple of people that their internet is dropping out on them. It's that's fine. Participate to the degree that you can. Okay. I am going to post this afterwards. But there's one other thing that I want to. So yeah, we absolutely read humans, right? And we write humans, right? Okay. So I want to use this guy Cornel West to explore one more idea today. And I posted this actually in Hypothesis. I don't know if anybody actually watched the video, but there's a minute of video. And in this minute, Absolutely, Alexander. Life is not about finding yourself; it's about creating yourself, which is also a kind of writing. Dot 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 dot. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So there's this really awesome documentary called Examine Life. I really recommend that you watch parts of it. It's really interesting. This woman, Astra Taylor, went around and asked some contemporary philosophers, "Hey, let's give you 8 minutes to talk, right? What are you going to talk about, right?" And the first one in the movie, at the very beginning of the movie, because it's a documentary, is this guy Cornel West, and he's a little bit hard to understand. So I'm going to turn on the closed captioning. But I'm going to play this for you twice, and then I want to break it down just a little bit because he's talking. Or I'll pause it. Because there's two parts of this that I really want you to pay close attention to. Okay, I'm going to play it through once and just let you holistically take it in, right? And then I'm going to go back through and I have a couple of objectives that I'd like to achieve. Okay.
Examine life is not worth living, Plato says in line 38a of the Apology. How do you examine yourself? What happens when you interrogate yourself? What happens when you begin to call into question your tacit assumptions and unarticulated presuppositions and begin then to become a different kind of person? See, I put it this way, that for me, philosophy is fundamentally about our finite situation. We can define that in terms of beings toward death, with featherless, two-legged, linguistically conscious creatures born between urine and feces, whose body will one day be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms. That's us, beings toward death. At the same time, we have desire. Why we are organisms in space and time, and so it's desire in the face of death. And then, of course, you've got dogmatism, various attempts to hold on to certainty, various forms of idolatry. And you've got dialogue in the face of dogmatism. And then, of course, structurally and institutionally, you have domination. And you have democracy. You have attempts of people trying to render accountable elites, kings, queens, suzerains, corporate elites, politicians, try to make these elites accountable to everyday people. So philosophy itself becomes a critical disposition of wrestling with desire in the face of death, wrestling with dialogue in the face of dogmatism, and wrestling with democracy, trying to keep alive very fragile democratic experiments in the face of structures of domination, patriarchy, white supremacy, imperial power, state power, all those concentrated forms of power that are not accountable to people who are affected by it.
All right. So that's basically Cornel West summing up what philosophy is to him, because that's basically the question that Astra Taylor, the woman who directed this film, asked him, right? What's philosophy mean to you? Or what is philosophy to you, right? So I'm going to back up and I'm going to play that again. And I want to go through a couple of different details. I want to focus on a couple of different details. So I'm going to pause it a couple of different times, right? I know that that's a lot to take in. I don't expect you to necessarily follow all of that right away. It took me a couple of times before I really started to break it down, right?
An examine life is not worth living, Plato says in line 38a of the Apology. How do you examine yourself? What happens when you interrogate yourself? What happens when you begin to call into question your tacit assumptions and unarticulated presuppositions and begin then to become a different kind of person?
Okay, so first of all, he's saying, what happens when you start to challenge that lens, challenge that worldview? And for him, right, he's saying basically what happens when you start to say this is water? What happens when you start to say, well, what if my default isn't perfect, right? And for West, that means you become a different kind of person. What kind of person is he describing? Anybody? I'm putting this out there for you. What kind of person is he describing?
Thinking.
Okay. So somebody who leans in towards thinking, everybody thinks, right? You touch something hot, it hurts, you take your hand away. That's thinking. But he's describing something a little bit different. Somebody who's not the dead-eyed person that David Foster Wallace was describing, right? Somebody who actually leans into the question of how can I think? How can I explore? The way that I really like, there's some language that he uses to describe this, Cornel West, he describes it as, later on, he describes it as a critical disposition. And I'm going to come back to that term later. To use that term as kind of a token for how to explore what he's describing, a critical disposition. So there's that, right? You start to challenge yourself, you start to challenge your worldview, and by challenging your worldview, you become a different kind of person, a person with a critical disposition. Is a person with a critical disposition perfect? No. Are they smart? Are they better than other people? No. What kind of person are they then? Well, we can talk about that, right? Okay, but then there's this other thing. He outlines 3 sets of Ds. 3 sets of words with D in them, right?
Yeah, I put it this way, that for me, I mean, philosophy is fundamentally about our finite situation. We can define that in terms of beings toward death, featherless, two-legged, linguistically conscious creatures born between urine and feces, whose body will one day be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms. That's us, beings toward death. At the same time, we have desire. Why we are organisms in space and time, and so it's desire in the face of death. And then, of course, you've got dogmatism, various attempts to hold on to certainty, various forms of idolatry. And you've got dialogue in the face of dogmatism. And then, of course, structurally and institutionally, you have domination. And you have democracy. You have attempts of people trying to render accountable elites, kings, queens, suzerains, corporate elites, politicians, try to make these elites accountable to everyday people. So philosophy itself becomes a critical disposition of wrestling with desire in the face of death, wrestling with dialogue in the face of dogmatism, and wrestling with democracy, trying to keep alive very fragile democratic experiments in the face of structures of domination, patriarchy, white supremacy, imperial power, state power, all those concentrated forms of power that are not accountable to people who are affected by it.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pause that. Wait, come on. Okay. All right, here we go. No, I'm gonna say goodbye to Claire. Oh wait, come on. Save. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna pause. Wait, I'm gonna stop sharing.
So
Come
can
on.
you hear me well?
This is this lady Avital Ronell. She's really fascinating too. So if you want to go watch the movie, I highly recommend it. But okay, so here I'm going to come back and I'm going to write those things down again. Let's see. Let's put them down here. Death versus. So the first thing he mentions is a critical disposition. Now, and then he mentions these 3 sets of Ds: death versus desire, right? Dogmatism versus dialogue, and democracy versus domination. And he's basically saying that all of these things are happening, or excuse me, all of these conditions we're weighing them back and forth all of the time. It's never all death, unless you're dead, right? And it's never all desire. It's never all dogmatism. It's never all dialogue. It's never all democracy, and it's never all domination, right? So I'm going to very, very quickly focus on this one. We'll come back to the other ones later, but I'm going to very quickly focus on this one because the Velvet Revolution is a perfect example of democracy versus domination, right? You had you had the Republican Party that had a stronghold on power. They were dominant in Armenian politics. And then a democratic movement with My Step stepped up and started to assert itself. And it gained power and gained power and gained power and gained power. And suddenly it made Sargsyan step down, right? And suddenly it put Pashinyan in power. Well, what's interesting about that, amongst all sorts of things, right? What's interesting about that is that suddenly My Step is dominant, right? They were the rebellious faction, but the moment that they came into power, like the second shoot, my words are failing me, but the second election, right, the one that really legitimized My Step, the Republican Party got like 8%. Like they've been in power for decades, and suddenly they get 8% of the vote. Like they were completely kicked out of town. Now, I'm not saying that that happens forever, and I'm not saying ... But the point is that is a perfect example of democracy versus domination at work. Both of these things happening, right? So I want you to kind of sit on this for today, right? I want you to sit on the notion of what Cornel West had to say. And then between now and next Tuesday, I'm also going to ask you to read a few texts. And I was thinking that I was going to have you read, I think I was going to have you just read these ones, but I don't know if I'm going to have you read all three of them. I'm going to look back over things. I don't think I'm going to have you read the introduction to Drive just yet. But I'm going to give you a couple of texts. Watch for them on the homepage. And I want you to just do the same thing that you've been doing. Engage in a dialogue with one another. Don't try to dominate each other. Engage in a democratic dialogue with one another, right? And that's where we will be for next Tuesday. Okay. Good. And I want to look at your chat from today. Obviously we're out of time, so I do want to come. I do want to come back and talk about a couple of these things. And we'll do that next Tuesday. So we're going to pick up this discussion. We're going to add a couple of texts to it that you're going to review over the weekend, but I really want you to practice critical reading and ... blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Can you put the video in Moodle, because I just couldn't watch it because of my...
Yeah, I'm going to put the video in Moodle. I think I had to stop at the very end. No, it's still recording. Okay, I will put the videos on Moodle. I'll put my notes on Moodle, and in the Moodle section, look for the text that I want you to read before next Tuesday. I'll post them by, I don't know, like noon today. Wow, I love Koyana Scazzi. I can never pronounce it, Gohar, but I would love to talk to you about that because it's really interesting. Okay, cool. We'll talk next week. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. And Arman, you said you're not going to be here next Tuesday?
Yeah, most likely, because I'll be on the flight to Yerevan.
Okay. What I'd like you to do is simply check after Tuesday's class if you're going to miss it. Thanks for letting me know beforehand. And if you're going to miss it, I want you to make sure to check Moodle as soon as you get off your flight. But let's see, maybe you'll be here next Tuesday. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
And then, sorry?
No, thank you.
And I'll fill you in if you need to do anything more than just check the Moodle, okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. Have a wonderful weekend.
You
as
too.
well.
Bye.
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 Bye.